Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.
Welcome to the Benjamin Dixon Show. I am your host, Benjamin Dixon. Today is Monday, December 30th, 2019. I am extremely tired of covering stories like the one I'm getting ready to cover out of a town unironically named White Settlement, Texas. 3 people are dead, including the gunman. He opened fire during a church service, a live stream. The video was captured and subsequently shared all across the internet. But during Sunday morning service at West Freeway Church of Christ near the Fort Worth area, a shooter who was wearing a fake beard and sunglasses pulled out a shotgun after communion and killed 2 parishioners before he was killed by an armed gunman. And this is, I think it was just over a year ago when almost an entire congregation, actually, no, it was 2 years ago. It was November of 2017 at the First Baptist Church in Sutherland Springs, when 24 people were killed in Texas. And this in between time, we've had so many school shootings. And it's just tiresome, man. I watched the video on Twitter only because it looked like it was a still shot. The video was so still. The moment before the shooting took place, everyone was quiet. No one was moving. And then I realized this was during communion after the fact. But all of a sudden, you look at this picture that looks like it's just a photo, and then someone jumps up and shoots 2 people, and then he's gunned down. And this doesn't change in America. It doesn't change. The arguments are the same. And this is not to draw an equivalence between those of us who are fighting to end gun violence, even if that means making it more difficult to get guns. It's not drawing a false equivalence between those people and the disingenuous arguments about a good guy with a gun. The good guy with a gun in this case, it's sad that we have to have armed security at churches now. Mother Emanuel AME, that was at least, I think we're going on 4 years. I don't know exactly when the pastor and I believe it was 9 other members who were at Bible study on a Wednesday night were gunned down by Dylan Roof. And it just goes on and on and on. And at what point will we actually do something about this epidemic that isn't hitting other countries? This epidemic is not something that is inevitable. It's not something that is unstoppable. It is something that we don't have the political will to stop in this country. I came to grips with that with the Sandy Hook shooting, when I saw them politicize the deaths of children, of babies, not even teenagers, babies, right before Christmas. Right before Christmas. It had to be, 2014, if I'm remembering correctly. When I saw that, I realized that there is no hope for this country, and that the way this country will fall apart, the existential threat to the United States of America, is the violence that's perpetrated on ourselves, because we won't do anything about guns, and because we glorify guns, and because it's more important for us to be able to say, oh, a good guy with a gun stopped something, than it is for us to save the people who were killed. The good guy with the gun was not fast enough to save the 2 people who were shot. Even as I watched the video, it looked as though one of the good guys with the gun could not get his gun out fast enough, and he was one of the victims. If I saw the video correctly, in the back of the church, the top left-hand side of the video, you'll see as the gunman stood up and pulled out his gun, another gentleman in the back stood up and reached behind him to grab his gun, and he was the first one shot and killed. You got to excuse me. I'm not sniffling because I've been crying, which I have. I'm sniffling because I'm still recovering from a cold. It's terrible, man. I'm so tired of this. I'm so tired of covering gun violence stories and covering gun violence stories in the form of police violence, particularly against Black people. I'm weary with those stories. And you'll notice I don't cover them that much because they take a toll on us. It is taking an emotional toll on the collective body, the collective American body politic. And what's even more painful is the fact that this is being celebrated as a victory. The good guy with the gun saved everybody else. Yeah, he did. Congratulations. And I'm actually grateful that he did that. But why do we have to sit around and wait for hero fantasies? You know, I would guarantee you that most people would rather not have to step in and be a hero. In actuality, most people have fantasies about that. But if we had to do that day over again yesterday, that Sunday service, I guarantee you the good guy with the gun would rather not have had to use it. And we'll never get to that point. We'll always be putting people in scenarios where they have to die a hero. You know, students charging gunmen in schools, dying heroes. Coaches having to die to protect children. Yeah, they're heroes. And we're more fascinated. We have half of this country who are fascinated with celebrating people who die, saving other people, rather than doing something about the damn guns. I'm tired of covering this. And the reality of it is that the chances are I'll have to cover this again this week, but this time another city, a different city, with a different group of people mourning, all because we won't do anything about guns. Take a listen to this exchange between John Carl of ABC News and presidential candidate Andrew Yang on yesterday.
But I'm confused. Your ad is explicit. Your ad says Medicare for all. Your plan is not Medicare for all. It's not even Medicare for some, because in your plan there's not even a public option.
Our plan is to expand a universal health care system to all Americans. Medicare for all is not the name of a bill. Medicare for all is universal health care for all Americans.
But Medicare for all is Medicare for all, right? I mean...
Well, our health care plan would be based on Medicare and expanding it over time to more and more Americans. You lower the eligibility age and then you make it widely accessible.
Okay, I didn't see that in your plan, but...
Okay, that didn't go well. Now, take a listen to the ad that John Carl is referring to, where Andrew Yang is trying to convince America that he's really for Medicare for all.
We need to move towards a Medicare for all system where every American has access to quality and affordable services.
His ideas are a blueprint for a new way forward. A healthcare system with Medicare for all.
Okay, so clearly there is a disconnect. Clearly, Andrew Yang is trying to convince America that he wants Medicare for all. But his plan does not actually call, his policy, his proposal does not actually call for Medicare for all. But because it is, the Overton window has moved so much that if you are not calling for some type of Medicare for all coverage, like you can't, this is a testament to how successful Bernie Sanders actually was in 2016. Because you can't be on the stage without discussing Medicare for all. I mean, that is a significant shift in the Overton window. But what we're coming up against are people like Pete Buttigieg and Andrew Yang, who, for whatever reason, they have a vested interest in not actually going after Medicare for all. But they have to have the appearance as though they are. And what I'll give Pete, honestly, there's levels to these things. Like, as much as I think Pete is a disingenuous actor, I don't think he's going as far as to explicitly say we're going after Medicare for all when his plans actually say otherwise. See, Pete is at least, this is crazy because I have to say, Pete is at least honest enough to say Medicare for all who want it. The translation of that means really nobody gets it because the means tested program is going to quickly dissolve. It's not going to be able to sustain itself. But at least he's not out here like Andrew Yang saying, we're going for Medicare for all when his plans say the exact opposite. He doesn't even have a public option in his plan. But we are here at this place in this country right now today having the conversation about Medicare for all because Americans want it, because not only other countries have it, not because only because of all the exorbitant bills that people have gotten, the $8,000 emergency room visit, the $3,000 ambulance transportation, but also because Bernie Sanders, his revolution that began in 2016, has shifted the Overton window. Take a listen to Elizabeth Warren.
I'm still with Bernie. We're still there on Medicare for all. I think it is the right place to provide the maximum amount of health care to everyone who needs it at the lowest possible cost. And that's how I want to do the transition plan. I want to get the most help to the most people as quickly as possible, and I got a plan for that.
Now, the fact is that Elizabeth Warren's plan is not right there with Bernie Sanders, but I really just want to speak to the fact that it is now a requirement that you cannot be a Democratic nominee unless you are speaking about some type of Medicare for all plan. That's a huge shift in our Overton window. And if we've done that with Medicare for all, we can do that with any number of programs. We can shape this country to be exactly what we want it to be. And all of us play a role in that. Every single one of us play a role in that, particularly because of social media and our ability to draw a line in the sand. And while people are calling it purity politics, the reality is that no, it just means that we stand for something. We stand for something. And what we stand for are policies that are beneficial to everyone. Some of the people who are fighting against it, they stand for things too. They will make a clear line in the sand when they're ready to go to war. They'll stand firmly. They'll fall on their sword in order for us to go to war. But then they call us the ones with purity politics when we stand for something like Medicare for all that is going to overwhelmingly change the experience of every single American.
Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show.
Well, all right. Well, interestingly enough, we don't have any new patrons to celebrate today. But that doesn't mean we won't have a patron party. This is a party just for you. Let's just take a break and celebrate everyone who supports the show. Patrons and non-patrons, people who share. Let's bop. Now, you can ensure that we always have a patron party by going to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and signing up to become a patron. You can sign up for as low as $3 a day. I'm sorry, not $3 a day. I mean, you can sign up for $3 a day. That'd be dope. But you can sign up for $3 a month. That's like me just coming to town and you buy me a cup of coffee. Yeah, don't get me wrong. $3 is an expensive cup of coffee. So obviously we'll be going to one of these hipster coffee shops. Okay, we have to cover another incident of violence here in the United States. According to the BBC, a man brandishing a machete attacked a Hanukkah celebration at a rabbi's home in Monsey in the New York area. It is an area with a large population of quote-unquote ultra-Orthodox Jews. According to the rabbi who was at the house, he described the moment as the attack began, and he said, quote, "The man pushed his way in, slammed the door shut, and said, 'None of you are getting out of here.' Something to that effect. Nobody's leaving." He pulled out a machete and starts to do the unthinkable, according to the rabbi. 5 people were injured. Now, tragedy is tragedy. But if this man had had a gun, no one would have survived. Right? Just you have to look at the difference. I mean, this is a tragedy, but this guy did what he did with a knife. And if I'm reading the story correctly, no one died. People are injured. They're in the hospital. And so we have to put a pin there. It could be someone still will die from this. But there's a huge difference between the damage that you could do with a knife and the damage that you could do with a gun. And we're in a place in this country where people try to draw an equivalence between the two. The man was captured. He was arrested, and he's charged with 5 accounts of attempted murder. Now, the real core of the story is the story of anti-Semitism and the obvious rise of anti-Semitism in this country. But as we talked about last week, there's this thing that happens. I mean, from the right wing of this country, definitively, most certainly organizes around their bigotry. They organize around their racism and they organize around their anti-Semitism. But because the right wing of this country is in lockstep with the right wing government that's currently in power in Israel, they get to hide underneath the guise of being the friends of the Jewish people. When in reality, they're not friends of the Jewish people. They are friends of the right wing government in Israel. An entirely different thing. But if you are friends with Jewish people, as well as advocate for the human rights of Palestinians, well, then you are anti-Semitic. And it is through that lens that Bernie Sanders, who is supposed to be the first Jewish president in this country, is regularly attacked. Not because there's anything that he has said or done that hints remotely that he is anti-Semitic in the way that Stephen Miller, who is Jewish, is clearly anti-Semitic. Right? It's because he appeals to the humanity and the human rights of the Palestinian people at the perceived expense of the right-wing government there in Israel. And what blows me away the most in this equation is not the right-wing anti-Semitism. No, we're used to that. For a while there, I was blown away by the right-wing government of Israel being in league with right-wing governments across the globe who are anti-Semitic. But the more I study that, the more it makes sense, because at the core of right-wing anti-Semitism here in the United States is the desire to have an ethno-state in which it is dominated. The politics are dominated by one race, one ethnicity, white people, white Europeans, right? They want America to be an ethno-state. And so to that end, they're okay. Like, they hate Jewish people, right? But if Israel is for Jews, then America is for white Europeans. That's what they want. That is their fantasy. So it starts to make more sense how a right-wing government in Israel can be in league with the right-wing movement across the globe, because what they want more than anything else are ethno-nationalist states. But what blows me away still to this day are centrists, establishment Democrats, who would rather attack someone like Bernie Sanders, not so much because of his human rights, his support for human rights for Palestinian people, but because of the political expedience of the tool of accusing someone of being anti-Semitic. They saw what happened to Jeremy Corbyn in the UK, and now they're going full throttle accusing Bernie Sanders, and it doesn't matter that he's Jewish in the sense of, oh, it's not possible that he could be anti-Semitic and be a Jew. Well, obviously, Steve Miller is the exception to that rule. So it's not that. They're going full throttle after him because it is an easy tool to help them sustain power, to help them fight off this progressive movement. And so Bernie Sanders has a diverse coalition. I mean, he has a coalition of white people, of black people, of Jewish people, of people of the Muslim faith, people of Arabic descent, I mean, he has, Ilhan Omar has endorsed him. She's Muslim, and he has this diverse coalition. And in this coalition, everyone is calling for human rights, support of the human rights of the Palestinian people. But yet and still, centrists look at this as an opportunity to sandbag him, to weigh him down with the baggage of accusations of anti-Semitism from him, as well as accusations of anti-Semitism from people around him. That's the play that's happening this morning. That's the play that's going to happen between now and the election. Because if they can convince you that Bernie Sanders is anti-Semitic, well, that's an accusation that sticks. It's an accusation that sticks like racism. And I know I discussed this pretty in depth last week, but it's come up again because of these attacks. The attacks that happened over the weekend. Now, all of a sudden, Bernie Sanders is responsible for that because he's associated with Ilhan Omar. And obviously, Ilhan Omar has to be, sarcasm here, guys, just in case, she has to be anti-Semitic because she's Muslim. So this is a tangled web that we have to navigate, not only for the presidential election, but honestly, we have to navigate this to fight off the attacks against the entire movement. See, none of this is about protecting the people of Jewish faith or Jewish descent. None of this is about stopping anti-Semitism. None of it. Donald Trump's tweet calling the attack in Muncie horrific. That's not about stopping the next attack, right? Centrists who try to go after Bernie Sanders because they say he's anti-Semitic. That has nothing to do with protecting people, Jewish people, and nothing whatsoever. It's 100% about political posturing and power and protecting themselves from a progressive movement. And for Donald Trump, it's just something he has to do that, well, because he's president, he has to say something. So, I mean, we see, and this is the nature of politics. Yes, I get it. This is just politics. But we also have to know the score. We also have to know the game. And we have to realize the weapons that are used against us to stop our movement.
Similarly, the amendment process. They were wise enough to realize that they didn't have all the answers and that some things would change. A good example of this is something like slavery or civil rights. It's an embarrassing thing to admit, but the people who wrote the Constitution did not understand that slavery was a bad thing and did not respect civil rights. And yet they created a framework so that as the generations came to understand that was important, they could write that into the Constitution too and ensure true equal protection for all of us.
This is what happens. That's Pete Buttigieg, right? This is what happens when you just can't say unequivocally that our nation was founded on white supremacy. And this is Pete Buttigieg. This video looks like it was from like the 80s, the quality of the video. And it's really funny that Pete Buttigieg is younger than me, but he has like footage from way back. Like he's been trying to be a political figure for a long time, all the way back to before we had high definition. And in each of those videos, he has a problematic take, and here he's saying the founders didn't know that slavery was bad. I mean, that's unequivocally wrong, right? That's historically wrong. But this is what happens when you're trying to appease people who don't want to admit that our country was founded on a system of slavery and white supremacy and that they knew what they were doing was morally reprehensible. They knew what they were doing was wrong. Thomas Jefferson wrote about it. And what they could not overcome at the founding of our country was the intransigence, the way that slavery was entrenched in our system, in our economic system. They could not separate that. We would not have founded a country. America would not be a country today if the founders didn't just leave everything in place the way it was. And this is not to elevate the founders above the racism and the white supremacy necessary to institute and maintain slavery, because they owned slaves themselves. It's just to say that they were okay with the hypocrisy of saying that all men are created equal, yet you have men and women and children enslaved. They were okay with that. Some of them thought themselves to be morally complex, and so they wrote things about the complexity of their arguments, of their position on slavery, and that how it was a moral scourge, but it was still a system that they maintained, a system that they benefited from. So setting them aside, setting the ahistoricism of that aside, Pete Buttigieg is demonstrating not only the fact that he's willing to rewrite history, but the fact that he doesn't have the moral fortitude to actually just state a simple fact that our founders, our country, was founded on the backbone of slavery. And yes, they knew it was wrong. They knew it was wrong. You had people fighting against it since its inception. And whether or not there was ever a white person who fought against it, they still knew it was wrong. But again, this is Pete Buttigieg trying to appease everyone. This is a person who cannot look at audience in the face and say something difficult, something that's going to make them uncomfortable. This is not a person who speaks truth to power. This is a person who manipulates his words to get along with power, to obtain power. This is not a person who would sacrifice one bit of his influence or his ascent to the throne in order to speak the truth. And man, he's been doing it for a long time. He's been doing this triangulation, these equivocations. He's been doing this for a long time. So what do we expect him to do when he becomes president? Thankfully, that's never going to happen. So something I'm thinking about doing here in Atlanta and across Georgia, and really essentially probably across the country as it grows. But I've been thinking lately about the Progressive Army. I don't talk about it much. It's always in my announcements. But the Progressive Army, we started as a website to discuss political news and content. And it's been there for about 4 going on 5 years. But what I'm so much more passionate about now is organizing and getting people not only out to vote, but organizing around particular issues, organizing around particular policies, and having boots on the ground to actually knock on doors for policies and knock on doors for issues and to make phone calls for issues. And so I'm really just kind of brainstorming, and I've been thinking about it for a while, literally transforming the Progressive Army into a group of volunteers who, whatever city you're in, you don't have to travel the country, but we organize and we connect, right? We can connect with organizations that already exist. And so we wouldn't be recreating the wheel. What we would do is just kind of supply the foot soldiers to connect with organizations that are already existing, that are already organizing, and just send a contingency to send in the cavalry, the backup. You know, it might only be 5 people in a city, but 5 people added. Ask any group of organizers, 5 more individuals to help them knock on doors is a beautiful thing. It is a godsend. So I'm just thinking about that. I'd like to have your feedback. Give me a call or send me an email, send me a tweet, and let me know what you think about us changing the Progressive Army into being something like that. I'll see you next time.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show. If you like this episode, be sure to share, like, and subscribe.